education and skills development, my friend Prashanta, head of the delegation from Sri Lanka, and I, Jazamin from Bangladesh, are here to briefly introduce you to our distinguished panel. I will begin with the chair of the panel, Mr. R. Mukundan, who is the Managing Director of Tata Chemicals Limited. He joined Tata Administrative Service in 1990, and he holds an MBA from FMS Delhi University, and he was also trained as an engineer from IIT. The panel includes Mr. Sathish, who is an investor and social entrepreneur and chairs Pinewood Partners. He is also the founder chairman of OLPC India Foundation, with a mandate to reach out to 250 million children who are growing up without access to computing. He was educated at the Fletcher School at Tufts University and the Kennedy School at Harvard. We also have with us Mr. Nilesh, Vane, who brings more than 15 years of experience across various business lines of Aptech, and he was also trained as an engineer from IIT Bombay. He is currently the Executive Vice President and Chief of Strategy and IT at Aptech Limited. We have with us Ms. Khadija Mushtaq, who is the Executive Director and CEO of Roots School System. Khadija has completed her master's degree in economics from CAAYE University in Islamabad, Pakistan. Roots School System is a private educational institution of international standards with its future-oriented broad-based curriculum and its affiliations with the edXL International UK and Cambridge International Examinations for O-levels, IGCSEs, AS levels, and the University of London for the undergraduate program. I will now invite my colleague Shankar to introduce our other distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Good morning, all of you. It's great pleasure and privilege to be here at the first CAAYE Summit in Mumbai. Actually, as a founder member of CAAYE, Sri Lanka considers this as a very great opportunity, and we will see the results not immediately, but you have 200 delegates in the Bombay Stock Exchange today, and we will see the results, I'm sure, in the next year. It's my privilege to introduce the first speaker, Mr. Shankar Vanavarayar. He's the Executive Director, Shakti Auto Motors, and Correspondent President, NIA Education. Mr. Shankar is the Executive Director of Shakti Auto Motors Private Limited, and it's a part of Shakti Group, and based on Coimbatore. He is also a Correspondent President of NIA Education based in Pollachi in Tamil Nadu, India. Shankar has a bachelor's degree in commerce from PIS Arts and Science College in Coimbatore, MBA from Cardiff University, United Kingdom, and Master in International Education Management from University of Leeds. Shankar plays a lead role in various Shakti in the Shakti Group that values at US 660 million. You are warmly welcome to the summit. And it's my privilege to introduce the next speaker, Mr. Maheshwara Sahu. He has joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1980. After working various fields and positions, corporations for more than 13 years, he worked more for than 5 years for the Government of India, Ministry of Industry, dealing with various policy-related issues. Sahu has handled the work of earthquake reconciliation and also worked as the Industries Commissioner for a period of 3 years. You are warmly welcome. And the last speaker, Mr. Sandeep Aneja. Sandeep is a founder and managing director of Kaizen Private Equity, India's first education-focused private equity fund. He leads strategy, investment analysis, fundraising, and relationship management with many other funds, clients, and investors. He has 70 years of experience with Sandeep currently represents the Kaizen on the board of company in the distance education service management in India. Thank you. And over to you, sir.
Is it clear? Okay. Firstly, let me thank Aneja and Krishnanta for this wonderful introduction, and let me welcome my fellow panelists and thank them for being here with us. When this topic of discussion, education and skill development came, and this is being a youth forum, I was reminded of my days in engineering. We used to sing this song called "We Don't Need No Education," but here education is being looked at as a career, also as a business opportunity. Fantastic, and I think the world has certainly moved on. We've got a very distinguished panel here. Before I hand it over to my fellow panelists to give their different perspectives, I'd like to just set some context here, which is my understanding of the context. One of the big shifts which is happening around the world is this increased focus on technology as an enabler, which we also had several speakers from the previous session speak about, and also this whole issue on focus on sustainability. We need more for less. I think that's the other concept which we are seeing around the world. And one of the interesting books I've read in this area of education, what shifts are happening both from demand and supply side, is a book called The Third Industrial Revolution, written by Jeremy Rifkin. And if you get out of the book, you get very interesting perspectives on the way the world is changing going forward. And especially for some of you who are going to be looking at world 30, 40 years from now, it clearly provides a perspective in that direction. So let me give some key highlights from that book. These are not my highlights, these are the highlights from Jeremy Rifkin's book, The Third Industrial Revolution. One big data he puts forward is that technology is fast eroding workforce. That's one data point you should keep. In 20 major economies, 31 million jobs disappeared from 1995 to 2002. That's a data point of the past. Now, projection to future, by 2040, 163 million jobs will reduce to few million in manufacturing sector. So manufacturing sector is going to see jobless growth, not just in India, not in China, around the world in 20 major economies. And he says a similar pattern is visible in other sectors like retail, banking, etc. And fundamentally driven by technology, where many jobs are getting eliminated. The shift is now increasingly moving away from market, government, informal sector to civil society, not-for-profit organizations. They are becoming big employers. And these are organizations which create social capital, religious, sports, cultural, advocacy. And already in Netherlands, according to him, 15% of people are employed in this sector, 9% in US, 12% in Canada. Lots of statistics available there. But one clear point which I think we should all keep in mind is technology is driving huge shifts in demand. I think that's one broad perspective. What those shifts will be in future, we need to keep that in mind. And on the supply side, things are not constant either. There is more the need for education to keep pace with job creation. There is a focus which we need to bring to more collaborative classrooms and distributed classrooms, because people need to collaborate more. And also the need to collaborate between technology and nature. I think bring nature in the classroom and take technology out to the place where it needs to be. Third big shift which is happening is lateral learning, which means peer-to-peer learning is gaining more and more importance. It's not from top to down, but it's peer-to-peer. And it's leading to new fields of, let's say, deep involvement like social entrepreneurship, holistic health, behavioral economics, where you put behavioral science and economics in one platform and come to the new science. So these are all shifts which you will see going forward in the next 20, 30 years. I'm just painting this broad canvas for you to keep at the back of your mind. When you look at this topic of entrepreneurship as a career, so at least one thing, what we need to be doing in that direction, also education as business opportunity. Do you use these broad trends when you design? In the medium term, we do see, and it's a pattern I think we are seeing in India. It's probably a pattern we see in other parts of our Asian Commonwealth countries. High unemployment, also huge huge skill shortage. There's a mismatch. With this backdrop in mind, I think we want to explore several thoughts, several ideas, several directions. To start this process of exploration, let me lay down some rules. Maybe each speaker will speak for between 5 to 9 minutes. I will give them a bit of flexibility. Some may have more to say, some less to say, but place their key points. At the end of it, maybe I'll ask few questions for clarification, and I will throw the floor open for the audience to ask your clarifications. But you've got a very interesting panel of speakers here. One who is an entrepreneur in education field. 3 people who are running schools, running education institutions. My friend in the government, going to give a government perspective on what the government sees. And also someone who is doing what I call social entrepreneurship through this one laptop and impact success in places in South America. So let me invite our learned guest, Khadija, as the first speaker. And you had several perspectives to speak to us about, including the women empowerment and other angles, and I think we are very eager to hear from you.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak here and to be part of this forum. I would also like to thank the Entrepreneur Forum back in Pakistan, which has invited me to be part of this forum. So when we talk, the topic was given to me was the education and skills, and being an entrepreneur in the education sector and running education schools right from 2.5 years to university level. So it was an interesting topic, and I thought that the economy that is driven by intense innovation and knowledge, and the marketplace which faces great competition and innovation, this constant renewal, the world of great opportunities and risks, the workplace where there's a lot on collaborative relationships and social networking, and society which is facing complex challenges in environment, in politics, in technology. The development of the key skills to be successful in this 21st century are imperative. The other question which comes in mind is that who develops these skills? Should we wait for these individuals to be 22, they enter the job market, or they enter the real world and then they realize that something is missing? So I believe that the education needs to realign with the demands of the 21st century. Now, what are the demands of the 21st century? When we are educating young people at the age of 5 to 16, we are preparing them for a world to enter in the next 10 to 20 years. So we have to understand that the jobs which are existing today will not be there in the next 15 to 20 years. So are we preparing the innovators? Are we preparing the creators? Are we giving them enough skills? Are we giving them enough food to be the leaders in their life? And I'm sorry, I think in this part of the world, including Pakistan, India, and other parts, education has been more on literacy. It has been more on mere degrees. It has been more on mere transfer of knowledge. And a lot of less focus is given on skill development, on capacity building, on intellectual development, on creativity. In fact, I believe that today's world is all about creativity. It's all about ideas. It's all about coming up with innovative concepts. And therefore, it is extremely important for education to adapt to this change, to prepare the students, citizens, individuals to triumph in the global skill race, to do something extraordinary in life. Then the other most important question comes to play is that what kind of skills are we talking about? Is it only the tangible skills or the intangible skills? And in life, there are a number of intangible skills. For example, today, the world is, there's a cliche about a global village, we being connected. Technology has made the world, at just, very close to one another. So how do we prepare the citizens to adapt to this change, to have openness of ideas, to have cultural sensitivity, and to adapt to ideas and thoughts which are absolutely new and in contrast to their own views? So are the educational systems doing enough to cater to this change? This is the greatest of questions. And I strongly believe that it starts from the early years, that we though we have to comply with the rules and regulations, we have to give them the content, we have to give them the knowledge, we have to give them the literacy, but creativity and ability to think out of the box, the unorthodox approach to learning has to be developed. Until the time we do not develop these skills right from school age, these individuals will be useless for the workforce. They will not be able to adapt to the great challenges and the risks that await them in this world to come. Another great perspective that I feel is that alongside the other subjects that we teach our children, we need to introduce entrepreneurship as a curriculum or citizenship as a curriculum to our students, so that at those early years they adapt to thinking, they think about new ideas, they think about different business ventures. We have to expose them to the real world, so internships with the real organizations, hands-on experience with the chamber or with mentors and people who have achieved something in life. Because you see, it is a culture of motivation that you have to develop. Till the time we are not able to inspire the youth, I'm afraid whatever we're talking is not going to work out. Because inspiration, motivation, passion to excel, and the energy and enthusiasm are the key factors for excellence. So that when we talk about the right portfolio of skills, we need to inspire them. And how do we inspire them is by providing them that culture where there's a lot of role models, where there's inspiration, where there's reward for creativity, and the school curriculum adapts to these kind of changes. And another important aspect for our economies is where we have human resource, we have population growing at an accelerating rate. So what are the challenges? This human resource is not only an input, I believe it is an engine. And the engine for growth, engine for prosperity, it is going to be the leading factor for economies to grow, for countries to have comparative advantage, and for people to have better lifestyle and living. But how would that be possible in the current circumstances? Are we doing enough? And I'm afraid that when we talk about collectively, our education systems in this part of the world are not producing individuals with the right set of skills or the portfolio of skills. And that gap which exists between an individual who leaves school or college and enters the real world is enormous. People have degrees, and they lack confidence, they lack public speaking skills, they lack exposure, they lack the thinking ability. They're unable, to think creatively. In today's world, scenarios are changing. There's nothing which remains stagnant. And therefore, it is very important that we develop individuals who are very creative, who are innovators, who are challengers, and who are coming up with creative ideas. And how can that be possible? This is the greatest question that has to be addressed by the education systems of our societies. And another important aspect, which is very closer to my heart, being the only women panelists right now, is that the stereotype, we were just having a discussion in the room, that the stereotype image for girls after college is to get married, and what is their role in their economies? With our economies having around 50% of women population. So how can they contribute to our societies? Are we, providing them the right portfolio of skills to be successful? Each one of them cannot be an engineer or a doctor or a medical practitioner. So does she have the skills to do things now? Technology is at the doorstep. She could take charge of her life and be an entrepreneur. But to be an entrepreneur, for a man or a woman is equally challenging, but I guess for a woman it's more challenging than a man, because she has to face the society issues, the taboos that prevail. And in the earlier panel, there was a lady, she was talking about continuation of the family business. I do not know, I think in this part of the world, it is difficult for girls to stand up and continue with the family legacy of businesses. So they can only do so if they have been empowered, if they have got that initiative in them and that capacity to think independently. Because when you are an entrepreneur, you have to be independent. Every day is a new day. You have to be dynamic, and you have to be a go-getter in life. So all of this rests on the kind of education that we provide to our people. Another important aspect, another important aspect that I would really like to highlight is that what is the goal of education? Are we providing individuals the capacity to turn their imagination into something that is going to be substantial? Are we enabling them? Are we nurturing them? Are we empowering them? Are we equipping them with the right set of skills to take charge in their lives? Unfortunately not. There is a huge gap between the education that they get today and when they enter the real life. This is the reason we have huge joblessness. Most of the people are looking for jobs rather than creating jobs because it is very challenging. It needs mental strength, it needs maturity, it needs the ability to take risks, go beyond the ordinary, and all that is the gap that exists in the education system today. Another thing that we have to focus on, that what kind of skills are we talking about? Is it only the skills of entrepreneurship or thinking creatively, but I think it is also about value judgment. It is also about, there's so much information available in today's digital age, how to sift the right kind of information, how to make judgments based on logic, based on substance, how to distinguish between right and wrong. This is also very important for our youth because the information is enormous, and how do they differentiate their ability to take responsibility, because we have to make our youth responsible. We have to make them understand that they have to take charge of their lives. Then to solve complex problems. So problem solving skills are very important as well, that what kind of skills are good. And then creativity, collaboration, collaborative approach to learning, because in today's world, a future entrepreneur or an individual has to work in a collaborative environment that may not be his own comfort zone. That could be people from diverse cultures, religions, background, views, and in order to thrive in that environment, he or she needs to have that kind of adaptability, that kind of openness of ideas, much more focused, much more liberal, and an exposure that is very important. And above all, it has to be innovation. There has to be innovation, use of knowledge, and to take up responsibility in their life. So for me, education is the catalyst of change. It is the way that we can change this world. It is the only hope that we have, that we can empower our youth and can move forward. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Khadija. That's wonderful. I think one of the things you brought to the focus is education is future looking, it's preparing citizens for tomorrow, and also this focus on new emerging words which needs to impart creativity, problem solving, collaboration. Let me now invite my friend Nilesh from Aptech to sort of speak about what I call the non-formal education sector. What are the challenges there? What are the opportunities? How do you see the world from that perspective?
Thank you, Mukundan. Thank you, Mukundan, for giving me this opportunity. I think Khadija started off extremely well, outlining how things are changing, right? And I'd like to start off from there. Normally, when we tend to talk about skills, it immediately converts to what is the ability to do something. So that's the easiest connotation that when we talk of skills, what is it that you are able to do? And in today's world, as Mukundan started off, technology is a great differentiator. So ability of people to be able to be at comfort, right? I would not just say to be able to operate, but to be able to live with technology, and more importantly, to live with people are two things that I guess we need to be able to look at us. Finally, people do business with people, people work with people, and as she rightly said, adaptability, ability to collaborate. Without the traditional, normally education has been about, I told you, you did this, right? If you remembered what I told you, you got your marks. If you did not recall it well, you used creativity, you don't get your marks, right? So that's been the sad part of it. But things are drastically changing. I think the biggest teacher these days is Google, right? So if you ask anyone to find anything, the first thing they quickly do is go to the net and find out answers in the jiffy. Coming to the non-traditional or the non-formal education, which is an area where I've had the opportunity to be working in Aptech, where we've been in business for close to about 25 plus years, we see it a little differently, right? So the industry talks of they need resources who can operate or have skills, and people say that we don't have jobs. And this is a huge mismatch that Mukundan started off with. And I wanted to slightly bring in a different perspective here. So last about 3-4 years has seen a large part of the world talk of employability, has been talking of skill development, and the technology has done a lot to be able to augment capacity. There's a lot of investment that has gone into this sector. The education has been the sweetheart of a lot of investors. I'm sure I have a colleague here who will speak a lot more about it. So there's a lot of interest. Media has been extremely interested. There are people who've done wonders with the YouTube. People have suddenly gone from being nowhere to nowhere. There have been cases like celebrities have been done. But what we find that there is something that perhaps needs to be done a little more is finally about what is a pot of gold at the end of it. Right? So all of us get lured by what is in it for me. Right? So here you have someone, if you were to do a skill development course, is the society going to look at it in the same way? Or is the society going to go back and say, it's an engineer or a doctor, right, who I prefer as my son-in-law or as my daughter-in-law, right? Or is it that the industry is going to say that, look, I don't need a graduate, I don't need a postgraduate, I don't need a doctor. I have this job to be done. A person with skill is good enough for me. Doesn't matter whether it's from the marquee institutes. What matters is that he can do the job. Right? If that were to start changing, right? If there can be enough emphasis that what you can do is really what matters, rather than what you come from or where you come from, there might be a far higher probability of bridging this gap of what we're calling is the mismatch between unemployed resources and the industry recruitment challenges. Right? So I think I just start off with that point, and maybe the panel can continue and we can take it up further depending on the interest.
From the government, I think one of the challenges which you've been highlighting when we were discussing is precisely what Dinesh highlighted, which is the challenge of skilling and the challenge what various SME sectors are facing. Your perspectives and thoughts on that, what we should be looking at, what we should be doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I touch upon the issue of the skilling, let us look at what is the macro environment in the part of our continent from where we are, all of us are. Where do we stand? If you look at the formal education in terms of the technical, I am talking specifically on the industry side, industry responsive skilling. The technical and vocational educations, the single digit spending of the entire education spending is not even double digit on the technical and vocational education. And the second important part is that who has better access to this formal education? The 10% rich people from the urban areas. They have 90 times the reach than the 90% of the other people to the formal education. So therefore, whatever we do in the time to come, in the next 10-20 years, definitely the access to formal education of the people will be limited. In terms, because the spending is less, even if you think of 15-20% increase in spending, if you think of providing better access to these people in that terms, the access to the formal education is going to be limited in this part of this continent. Then, where from we get the people who will catalyze this growth, what we are envisaging? My friend Mukundan mentioned about jobs disappearing in the next 10 years or so. The simple statistics tells that in the entire world, by 2020, there will be a skill shortage of 56.4 million. This is the statistics by International Labour Organization. Skill shortage of 56.4 million. Then they are not able to come from the formal education side, technical and vocational education. Therefore, there is a cause to look at how this number can come from the informal side. talk of this gap being tapped from the informal source, at that point of time, what is the role of the government? Is the government able to do something? I am very confident the government cannot do it alone. Government only can catalyze. This has to come in a state, the major stakeholders like industry, the educational institutions who have expertise in delivering this type of skilling exercise, and the government. They should work together to see that this skilling is given a top priority and on the ground you are able to do something. So with this background, therefore, I bring out one point that people tell in a country, in a part of economy, we should give topmost priority to physical infrastructure. To my mind, the skilling of people for various jobs, various things has a higher priority than putting physical infrastructure because it has the highest multiplier effect. So when we understand that this is the type of scenario in this part of this continent, I will try to bring down only one simple case study. What is a state, Gujarat in the country, in India, has tried to how they have attempted to see that this gap is bridged. I'll just tell you one thing. In the Indian, only look at Indian manufacturing sector. It is 18% of the gross domestic product. As a country, and an average, if you find in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and it is close to about 30-31% or something of that sort. The country, after careful consideration, after a lot of brainstorming, they have come out with a thinking that this should be increased to 25% by 2025. By 2025. When you do that, then possibly you have to, and they have made some calculations that this will call for jobs of about at least 10 to 15 million in the manufacturing sector to arrive at this scenario of 25% gross domestic product share by 2025. When I talk about the case study of Gujarat, we are fortunate that the Gujarat state, because of its tradition in good entrepreneurship, tradition in good public-private partnership, it has that figure of 18% is 26.4% in Gujarat. That means 26.4% of the gross state domestic product comes from the manufacturing sector. And consciously, the Gujarat has come out with a policy that let's look at, we take it to 32%. When you take it to 32%, this in next 5 years, this will call for a manufacturing growth of about 18 to 20%. 18 to 20%. The employment elasticity in the economy of our region, which is a published one, it is 3.8. When you look at the 3.8 employment elasticity, that means the rate of growth in job creation has to be 20 into 3.8, it should be 7.6%. So when we see that the job creation has to be 7.6% year on year, that means as of now, we are 20 million jobs in the manufacturing. That means every year it should increase by about 1 lakh. About 1 lakh. Therefore, you need 1 lakh people to be skilled only for manufacturing. If you look at the traditional, the formal education system, the very statistics states that if 100 people are coming out of the formal education system, the employability of these people to go and work in the shop floor in the industry, 90% are not fit to work in the industry. They have to be trained for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, like that. Therefore, those people also need skilling. Even though the formal system is giving a lot of people, they also need skilling. And in addition to that, from the informal sector, you have to get a lot of people who can join this pool to provide the skill set which is required to take your manufacturing sector growth into the desired direction. Therefore, in this case study what I was mentioning, Gujarat has embarked upon that we will create a lot of skill centers. But the skill centers has to be driven by industry. Industry has to set the curriculum, Professional agencies have to run that. Government will support it in terms of infrastructure and others, and you carry on, and so that you have sufficient creation of capacity for this informal network to provide you jobs. And our objective is that by 2013 and 300 centers can come up. We can churn out about 2 lakh people per year who can go with a minimal training to the shop floor for training. Friends, I must tell you, this exercise has got tremendous good response. The industry has been very nice. The institutions have come forward in a big way, and we have plugged in the before December 2013, a figure of about 212 till now. Centers have been agreed that the industry and the government together will set up these things. The message I wanted to give through this, that all the stakeholders involved in this entire exercise, they have to work together to see that the informal system gives you more and more people who are skilled to enter into the job market, and they need not wait for 2-3 years for the formal education to give them the capacity to do work in the industry. With a training of 3, 4, 5, 6 months, they can straight away go to the shop floor and have a better living and also they can help the industry to rise. So that was the thinking I had in mind, that we have to stress more on the skilling part of it through the informal system, which will in past will create a lot of entrepreneurs also. And I must tell you one thing, because of this initiative, you will be surprised. We have got investment intentions from about 7,000 to 8,000 small and medium enterprises in Gujarat in the last 1 year itself to set up industries there. Because they think, yes, this is the gap which was being perceived earlier, can be bridged through this mechanism, and that has given a lot of confidence level to them. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Saab. That was excellent detailing of what Gujarat is doing, especially in the area of skilling. But you started out with one issue, that access to formal education. Access is a big issue. And in that, I'm going to ask basically Sathish on this whole issue related to, what is this access issue? Is there something which we can do about it? I have personally seen one laptop per child office in Boston and interacted with them and the work they've done. So maybe some insights from the on that.
Thank you very much. And I must thank CAAYE and Vane to invite me. I wanted to say things that Khadija has so beautifully said. I don't think I have anything to say. Having said that, let me share some experiences. In particular, we have to first ask the right questions. When I look at 2012 India, I ask myself, why is it that 94% of our citizens do not have the right capacity of skills, of thinking, to be where they can be? We have the capacity in terms of talent, intelligence, but the skills we haven't developed, but it's more than skills. Creativity is the first job of a nation, to help people become as creative as they can be. We created MHRD at one time, Human Resource Development, but we didn't treat people either as resource or as creative people as such. Otherwise, 94% won't be outside the system. One laptop per child as an initiative was started with the basic premise that a lot of things did not happen because infrastructure wasn't there. If you first create infrastructure, it's very expensive. Can we do something? So without creating infrastructure, you can help a child begin to learn the best way they can learn in modern times. Is it possible? That's how it began. Because if you first create infrastructure, it might take a long time, but a child doesn't have time. At 5 years, a child can grow as a very different person, has the capacity to become a scientist, but the same child, by the time he or she is 10 years old, does not have similar capabilities. By 15, they could be best domestic help. In other words, each of us has the capacity to achieve, as a human being, at the frontiers of our potential. But if we don't engage ourselves early on at age 3, 4, 5, 6, then we lose that every day, every year. And by the time you think of looking at them by the time they're 15, 16, 17, they have very little capacity to grow into someone they can be. But we are talking about demographic dividend. That demographic dividend will become meaningful only when people have the capacity to think in terms of how can they imagine the future. So OLPC, when it was started, it had the 40 years, 50 years of research behind it across the world, and also the principle of You heard of cell phones, right? In 1995, if you ask the telecom minister of India, when will Indians have 10% of Indians have cell phone or telephones? He would have said that 2050 will be too early. But what happened? Something happened in the world. We didn't create that technology. India's contribution may have been in terms of some of us going and joining those companies. But technology got created as human technology. And that made it possible for India to have, in 10 years, about more than half of us began having communication capabilities. So sometimes technologies really help us leapfrog. And the OLPC was something of that kind. It was designed as something which could work when there was no electricity, in one water power, with solar power. It could work when there were rains and child could walk for 2 hours. It was rain-proof. It could be dust-proof. It was maintenance-proof. But it had more than everything else made a child curious. If 5 years of child began learning with it, potentially he could be or she could be a scientist. Uruguay president saw that in 2008 and decided that every Uruguayan 20 years from now will be capable as best as human beings can be, and every Uruguayan person must have it. And he went to his cabinet. You know what he said? I have brought a vaccine for you. So they said, what is it about H1N1? That was the vaccine needed in 2008. So cabinet asked H1N1, he said, no, against ignorance. What is that? Then he showed the laptop. And in 18 months, every single Uruguay child began learning, whether they were privileged, whether they were talented, challenged, did not matter. Every single child began learning the OLPC. And what happened? In about 6 to 8 months, they begin cracking the code in terms of programming. A child learning with OLPC can begin to create new programs at 6, 7, 8 years of age. Because the skills you will need 15, 20 years later to survive will be very different. I'll take you to another example. In 1982, 83, 84, 85, India's banking sector was dead against computers. We all said if you bring in computers, we lose employment. It took us 15 years to understand the only countries where employment was not a problem were the countries which had computers. So we were behind the curve. So every time a new thing comes up, we are always behind the curve. We don't imagine the future. But those who are setting the agenda for the world, they are always thinking 20, 30, 40 years ahead. So therefore they remain always ahead. And when something happens, I look at most of our policy planners and decision makers in one way. They look at a book, cover page of the book, and they say they could have written the book. You could have written the book, but you didn't write it. A lot more goes into that. Secondly, we are very happy playing with the toys that the leaders of the world give us. But those who make the toys, they imagine 10 generations ahead. So India's capacity today is as much as it wants to basically be. So Uruguay's experiment I'll share with you today, beginning in 2008, by the time they reach 2025, every single citizen of Uruguay will have as good capacity as anywhere in the world. Nobody can beat them. They will stand up to any pressures as such. Peru has also gone to get every single child learning with OLPC. These kids will be someone who can learn about learning itself. Our system is based on knowledge is finite. You can put everything inside the head and go to learning. If you look at another way, at one time government was leading institutions. Government founded IITs and IIS. Government took the initiative. Beginning in 1980, what has the government done? Left it to people in the private sector. An IIT was founded, Aptech was founded. They began looking at how do you create education that can give them the money in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. But government could plan how do you create in 20 years. My submission to government has been, and to our planning commission, that let's, just like you plan for your children, not for 5 years, plan for 20 years. Because if you plan for 20 years, they'll grow up into adults who are really productive. Plan for 5 years, they will just remain in primary schools. So number one, we have to change the thinking of planning. The 5-year planning happened in Bahar Lewis's time. We haven't outgrown it. Korea learned from us, but use that knowledge not to keep just applying the same field, but change it all and went way beyond. In fact, Narendra Modi talks about that Korea model now. My point is, why Korea model now? That was a model of 30 years before. Let's think of what India should be and can be with the kind of people we have. Every single child in India has the potential to be the best in the world, provided you let them be. So let's create, my point submission is this, if every child learns with the OLPC in India today, in 20 years we will be among the best countries in the world. We will have a thinking population. you'll have creative population, you'll have people who can begin to think in terms of how to think ahead. The skill development is a patch on our needs. The skill development is something what we're trying to do, like NSTC, etc. These will work the same way every government agency works. So you will check the boxes, you will find that everything is all right. There's nothing wrong with audit the system. And yet we are where we are, if you see from their point of view. But skill development is something which you do when you haven't fixed the system right in the beginning itself. That's a patchwork. We don't need to give aspirin when you need chemotherapy. Please, ignorance is a cancer. It doesn't respond to aspirin. But nearly everything we have done is like an aspirin to the cancer of ignorance. So submission is, OLPC was designed by mankind. It's the culmination, I would say, is the highest achievement of pedagogy and the technologists coming together to give us a way to address education, even if we have no school buildings, no electricity, no qualified teachers, and nothing. No matter where the child is, the child can become capable of dealing with the 21st century, the world we live in. But the road learning that we have will only churn out people who can be domestic help, who do not have the skills to think about it. So that's what OLPC has achieved in 3-4 countries, but we are in 50 countries. India has turned OLPC into something called a cheap laptop. It's not about cheap laptop, it's about learning, education. How do you make every child become who he or she potentially is? Thank you so much. I'll take any questions later.
Thank you. I think you've heard the perspective. We started with the formal education. We went into routes to addressing the gaps which we had. Let me get back to the formal education now with you, Shankar. You run several institutions, all in the formal sector. And what are the challenges you face? Very similar to what Khadija said, or something different?
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I think it's a pleasure to be here because I've been part of the journey for the formation, visioning, and the founding of CAAYE. And I want to start by saying this organization itself is innovative and full of an entrepreneurial spirit to achieve something. Saying that, the chairman just introduced me saying that I was from formal education. In our sort of chat before this session amongst the speakers, and also if you notice in the panel, formal education has become something of the past. It is not necessarily, somebody also referred to it as a certificate printing machinery. So I was in entrepreneurship, I was in family business for a few years, and my family, I'm the 4th generation, and family had founded educational institutions, higher education and school education, and today we have about 25,000 students. And I'm the first in my family to be fully involved full-time in education now. And I got into it because of a few reasons. One, it needed somebody. It was exciting because it's full of young people and a lot of opportunity. But I got into it precisely because of all the things that the other speakers have said, and we know that education in today's world, in a world post-Google, post-YouTube, post-Wikipedia, post the encyclopedia stopping print forever. Newsweek is going out of print this month. Post young people wanting to learn what they want and not necessarily with an assumption of what the society wants. There's a lot of change that has happened in the last 10, 20 years in the world. And in a country like India, in a demography like Asia, where there are millions of young people with completely varied aspirations coming from diverse backgrounds, I think education, one size fits all, does not suffice the need or answer the solutions, answer the needs. So saying this, the chairman just asked me, what are the challenges? I think the challenges are a few. The challenges is that education today, formal education, loves status quo. It's comfortable in a certain thought process and a framework which has worked for it in the past, which was founded about 400 years ago in a kingdom in Persia, where this exact format was relevant. But today, as I said, the change is not only necessary, but it's dangerous if we go on in the same way. One of the speakers said there's going to be a huge loss of jobs because technology will replace. But of course, the other speaker also said there will be generation. But both have the same problem, and both is related to education. If you lose jobs, and what is the reskilling, what is the unlearning, and what is the relearning necessary? If there are going to be new jobs, then we clearly know the existing skilling or education model does not work. So coming back to what I do, coming back to what is the opportunity. So I walk into our educational institutions, and I'm very happy that some of our students are here. It's amazing to understand the gap that exists. We operate every day wanting to teach. We operate every day assuming people are learning. This is where the gap is. I think the gap is exactly at this point where teaching today in its outdated format has to change. Learning has to become very different, has to become experiential. And there is so much of innovation, and some of the other panelists are working in that space. In an assembly like this of young people from different countries in Asia, there's one clear task that I think we all need to network and do, is all of us are few years or some years out of this formal education process. If we don't look at this as a sector that we want to work with, either as a business, as entrepreneurship, or as an opportunity where we can be, as young people, with an open mind to change the system because we went through it, we exactly know what it needs to change. I think that's going to be a great, exciting opportunity for many of you. And I clearly know that some of us are already working on it, but I ask most of you to indulge in this in some way, in some spectrum, because if we don't get involved in making this change, imagine 60% of India not being focused, not being directed exactly to what their potential could be, or even worse, misdirected. And we see some of that happening in other parts of the world. So education, in its primary need, focus, and opportunity, needs to understand that it is not a short-term effort. It is a long-term effort trying to change with what is in the context. And formal education today clearly needs to understand that. And now, lastly, before I finish, what can we do and what am I doing? The first thing we need to do is expose our teachers, our administrators of our educational systems to what is this. Because they're extremely busy in something called day-to-day, because our numbers are enormous. To just run this, people are very busy. Even if they're committed, even if they're involved, it's impossible for them to change because the status quo remains. The immediate need is for educational systems to interact, network with the so-called real world, but for the real world to push ahead inside and ask for change. Because I've been in industry, I always complain there is not the right kind of people to employ. And now I'm in education where I'm constantly saying, I don't know how to do that, or I'm educating them well, but they're not employable. The truth lies somewhere in between, and we all know that. So I'll finish by saying the challenge, I think, is going to be creativity in changing this process, innovation, which will give it a lot of experiential change that is necessary. But last but not least, I think involvement by every stakeholder in this space to change it sooner, because we can't sit back and watch this. It is not government's work. It is not going to be something that will come as a template as it came in the past, because our demography is so different even in one country. And with 60% as young people, the young Indian will travel the world as a labor force. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll finish by saying, let's get involved in education, let's look at it as an opportunity, and let's look at it as something that we owe to a system that made us the good things, but also let's change some of the things that are complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Shankar. I think you echoed the words of, the thoughts of Khadija in terms of creativity and change, and also bringing the stakeholders together. One of the key stakeholders in our company when we run a business is the finance world. At the end of the day, the man the check who writes a checkbook has the last word. So here again, I think you as a primary English, I think we would invite you to sort of speak about your perspective, not in terms of. You want to use that? Okay, sure. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, Confederation of Industries and Young Indians, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I bring a different perspective for the reason that we are India's first and only education-focused private equity fund. We look at businesses and education, and we have seen so far about 700-800 companies in the last 2.5 years, which goes to show that there are plenty of people who are building businesses successfully in the sector. A lot has been said already. I will not go into the esoteric aspects of what should be, because we've discussed that. The challenges of the sector are numerous. Challenges of skills development and entrepreneurship are numerous. We are aware of them. The focus of my conversation is about just 3 parts. Number one, I'll talk about what are the 3 pillars, in our opinion, of a critical society that leads to skills development and entrepreneurship. What are the challenges? And then ultimately 3 or 4 short case studies. I'll just finish with that. We believe there are 3 pillars to having a society that is focused on skills and entrepreneurship. Number one, when we talk about skills, the most common skill that we need is life skills. Number 2, one of the critical areas that we need to build, the second pillar, is self-realization. And number 3 is aspiration. The education system, as it stands today, does not focus on self-realization or self-assessment. It focuses on the teacher telling you how good or bad you are. It doesn't focus on life skills, it focuses on how you can score high scores, high marks in an examination, and therefore get to a great college or university or not. And it does not focus on aspiration, it focuses solely on aptitude. Long term in life, these 3 pillars come to play with you again and again and become the focus, become the pillars of your success, and we are very well aware of it. What are the challenges that this system faces that we cannot always easily implement and get to these 3 pillars, which in our opinion are critical to the success of an individual? Number 1 is economics and socio-economics. Not everybody is born equal. You can't always be in a position that you can say, I'll acquire all the life skills within the next 5 to 10 years. Life teaches you many skills based on where you are. Culture. Our culture is deeply rooted in the thinking that you're only as good as your marks. A culture is also very risk averse. We don't celebrate risk. We don't celebrate failure. We celebrate only a few marked known successes. We focus on them. One of the big challenges, again, facing the whole system is short-term versus long-term. While Mr. Sahu was talking about what Gujarat is doing in the short term, he's also talking about some long-term opportunities. In the long term, the education system needs to be designed for 30 years, look back and create what's needed today. But in the short term, if we just do that, we miss the boat today, and we have plenty of unemployed and unskilled people who need to be skilled right away. So that education system has 2 challenges we need to overcome. Given what's needed, given where we think we need to head with the 3 pillars we talked about, given where the challenges lie, we will have solutions. I'm not going to focus on those right now because we will have plenty of answers from the panel. We'll discuss that. I'm going to talk about a few case studies which are pretty inspirational, and they bring together a realization of what is entrepreneurship, what's risk-taking, and how it's happening all over India and Asia and the world over, what lessons to learn. A few years ago, we were sitting at at our office in Kaizen, and a gentleman from Gujarat came to us. He was working for the Indian Navy. He'd been there for a few years. He came up from a lower middle class family background. And when he traveled around the world with the merchant navy, actually, not the Indian Navy, he realized that it was a hugely different world than what we saw growing up in India. It opened his eyes, he resigned from merchant navy, went to the villages of Gujarat and started working on creating a chain of affordable schools. He has today created 4 schools in the last 3 years single-handedly in the smallest talukas of Gujarat with incredible success and in a business model which is real estate, not real estate dependent, totally asset light. So just what created the opportunity for him to think like that? Just being out there. His skills didn't change, his personality didn't change, his view of life changed. So as we build our education system, just presenting a new view of life is sufficient enough many times to kindle entrepreneurship in a person. That's number 1. Number 2, driving through India, driving through Uttar Pradesh about 3 months ago, came across, my cell phone ran out of power. Pulled over, there was a person very close to a village who was sitting there with a solar panel and many wires hanging from it, like you see at the airport with Nokia chargers, BlackBerry chargers, iPhone chargers, whatever you have. This person had all the charger adapters and he was using solar power to charge people's phones as they were running out of power on the highway. And he was charging them a decent amount of money. That's entrepreneurship. He is highly uneducated. That is all about building an aspiration around the market opportunity that you see and finding a solution to it. Education cannot teach that. Self-realization can. Now, these are very esoteric, beautiful, heartwarming examples, but that's not really scalable. What is scalable? I'll give you some other couple of examples. We are working with our department to put it back together. Just taking the person out of the classroom into the real world is being done in 2 ways, for example, by this company. Number 1 is being done by taking them to a laboratory, which they currently have for relatively elite school, bringing students from less elite schools into that and training them on things that really matter, which you will really use in your life once you get to real life work. And that 6-month band-aid is able to ensure that almost all of the students are able to get a job. That's critically important today. Maybe it's fixing a short-term problem, but it's good enough for now. The second way they do this is they have started a method called online internships. There are plenty of people in this room who have done well in life, who have achieved success at different levels. We are a hero to somebody in our lives. We've made a difference, somebody is looking up to us and listens to what we say. It's our job to scale that. To say, I can mentor a few hundred people online and I can run a case study online for a couple of hundred people a year. My time amount spent is the same, but I'm changing the lives of a couple of hundred people who will, for the first time in their lives, get out of calculus books or get out of economics books and get a sense of what it takes to build Tata Chemicals, one particular plant, what it takes to solve a problem. What is the element of finance in it, economics in it, human resource problems in it, and how do I face those challenges later, bringing realism. That is being done by this company as well. Lastly, one critical element of skills that I want to talk about is standard setting. While we all talk about opening skill centers and getting the industry and the academia involved and work together, we miss one critical aspect, and that lesson has to be picked from the leader in vocational training and skills development, which is Germany. What Germany did in the 1930s when the auto industry was taking off and there was severe shortage of human capital because human capital was diverted to multiple other opportunities such as conquering the world, there was a realization in the industry that they had to work together and set standards. They created pretty much a cartel in hiring and said anyone that doesn't meet a certain standard of skills, which are documented, is not hired by any one of us. Any one of the 4 leading manufacturers of cars wouldn't hire anyone without the skills. Why is that important? Unless we set standards, unless we as industry adopt those standards, unless we adopt those standards to say we will only hire from that skill we don't promote the adoption of skills by the people seeking jobs. So it's great where we are today. We realize that we have to create skills, involve the industry. The next step is to make sure the industry hires to those standards as well. Once we achieve that, I think we will have a greater catalyst force towards building employability, towards building entrepreneurship in the country. Thank you.
That was mainly highlighting about things which, nowadays you find lots of books called What They Don't Teach You in Harvard. I think teaching what is not taught, I think, is one of the key focuses which has been brought about. And also the focus on standard setting when you look at skills, the skill development, I think two key lessons. What I'd like to do, we've covered a vast array of topic here, but one thing which is coming through as a message is that with the vast number of people who need to be trained and skilled, there's a huge opportunity in the informal area. And what we also heard several speakers say, even in the formal area there's a great opportunity because of the need to be different and creative about the solutions, because the world is looking for that. So we had two speakers from that. And thirdly, there's a huge issue about building an infrastructure in an infrastructure-less world. That itself creates opportunities like one laptop per child. And we heard the government speak about the kind of support. And I'm pretty sure if you go to any corner of these 8 nations in the Commonwealth, which we're speaking about, education is one area where government is going to support. And government has limited finances, but it's all of us who can put these things together. So what I'm going to invite the next 15-20 minutes, maybe 3-4 questions from the audience. You can direct it to a specific speaker, and maybe clarification, maybe suggestions from your end, and then I'll sort of sum it up and bring to conclusion. I'm sure all of you are waiting for your lunch, but let's go through that Q&A a little bit. We can get, I'll relate back to the audience.
A lot of education is formal sector, formal education. And we talk about business opportunity in formal sector. The Indian law sees, a lot of education we talk about is formal education. The Indian law sees formal education in non-profit sector. Don't you see an inherent conflict and with the right to education, and so many legislations coming in education today in India? How's the business opportunity?
I'm going to invite you, Shankar. You probably looked into it a bit more than others.
Let me give some perspective. I also run an education institute. So I got into this field 5 years, family business and everything. And so I run an education institute.
I'm going to relate to you. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah. Okay, the question was very clearly there are lots of issues in the formal sector. Someone who's entered that sector, restrictions from government, there are things like right to education and lots of other areas. So he's saying, how do we go about fulfilling this demand broadly?
I wish I had an answer, in the sense, you said you're from the sector too. But I guess one side India will move on and change a lot more, because already we all know that there is a lot of potential in the periphery space of formal education. In the services, in technology, in providing many things which is associated to formal education. But in the core of formal education, I think very soon there will be change. And even though we can't see policy coming our way, and as you rightly said, the policies look as if it's going the other way, right? And saying that, you mentioned right to education and such of these policies, which in a populous nation like India, in a diverse space, I think it's extremely important we need to balance that too. Because unless that is there, some of the great things that we've already achieved in this nation, as we've become a strong player in the human capital space, is with that sort of a system and policy. So I think what will happen is it will be a balanced approach which is going ahead, and the possibility for value addition in terms of a business will happen in its periphery first, in its services and everything associated. Core of it, I think, will remain in this angle for a little more time till I think the demography is ready to accept a full-blown opportunity in that.
Nilesh, you had some perspectives on this over-regulation.
I think you deliberately asked that question to set the cat among the pigeons, right? Since you are very much in the sector, and as my friend rightly said, we have a political compulsion, right? That education should be a not-for-profit sector. So I just have two comments. Perhaps the people in education make a lot more money than the Indian telecom sector does. Anyone also disagree with that? No. Right? Okay. The second one is that officially education, you can't make profit in education. There's ample opportunities to make profit around education. Everyone agrees with that or also disagree with that?
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's a tremendous opportunity. Yes, as my colleague rightly said, it is politically extremely inconvenient right now to talk of for-profit formal education. But believe you me, there is phenomenal opportunity in formal education with all the restrictions to make tons of money around the education sector.
Excuse me, can I go for that? Hi, I'm Rasika, well sir, what you just said may be true, but I think that's true of all sectors of the economy in India, not just education. Having said that, I wanted to ask Shankar and Sandeep specifically. A lot of things are easier said than done, and it relates to what comment you made just now also. But what is it, how is it that you think that we can change what you think and you see that you see, rather than just observing what is going on? If the panel can answer that, maybe it might lead to a more conclusive, sort of discussion. Because here you are saying education is business opportunity. Yeah. And in India, the Gurukul system, it's a noble thing. It's not for profit, as you rightly said.
So I think just very quick, if we can answer the question that you asked, which is actually very hard to understand to start with, because it's a very philosophical question, and it's an important one, then we would have answered the entire dilemma that faces the entire education system in the world, not just India. Just taking examples from some other global and lessons. I don't like this mic, I'm going to stand up. Sorry, this is much easier mic, I don't know why that has more echo for me. So, Brazil, what did Brazil do 20 years ago? What did China do 10 years ago and 12 years ago? Brazil privatized the higher education system about 20 years ago. Brazil was a country of equal amount of disparity in haves and have-nots like India. There are few elements of that, few data points, which show that private education has played a significant role in bridging that gap. May or may not be, but that's been proven. And it's same in China as well. In fact, China's gross enrollment ratio about 20 years ago was half of India. Today it's double of India, and primarily driven by private education. So whether we choose to make profit or not in education, education has delivered reasonable returns to promoters, individual investors in a tax-free environment for decades now. Why is that good? Leave that question to hang in the air. I don't have an answer, maybe everybody else does. Second part is, if you can deliver good quality, measurable, forward-looking, global quality education at an affordable price and have processes that are around cost control but not around quality control, not around poor quality but quality is not compromised, and you make a tiny 15% margin, which is by the way allowed by the not-for-profit system in the trust structure as well, it's okay to do that. So let's leave the moral argument out of why education may or may not make money. Let's focus on who can do their job best. If the government today is seeking help from the private sector to come in and provide better quality and global perspective of education which prepares the young Indians and young Asians for a global workforce in the future, it's okay to provide that, because while we may have Gurukul system in the past, it's great for that time, it has great elements of it which can be brought by the private sector into the new education system, it doesn't fully work today. We have evolved 2,000 years later. So I think it's a very difficult It is about doing the right thing with high quality focus and delivering absolutely for that constituent that you're working for, the best you can do without charging a whole lot. If you can do that, you've done better than what was done in the education system yesterday. Excuse me.
Yeah. I have a question. Yeah. So I come from an industry which does research and data. Intellectuals around the world. Yeah. So I come from an industry which deals with a lot of data and research around the world, which deals with a lot of intellectuals and assist in their research around the world. And doing that research and education also,
someone told me, hold the mic like lady.
Yeah. So, in this research, we found two problems that Indian economy is facing right now. One is that, and you all share the same one today, is that unskilled labor wants to migrate and get jobs, but they cannot. And the second is that there are so many of them that you need entrepreneurship to flourish those jobs, right? Now, these are two problems that need to be addressed, and there was one solution that I read in a research which could add a note here. The companies which are hiring from tier 3 colleges and not tier 1 colleges. The tier 3 colleges students have higher retention in the firm as compared to tier 1 colleges. And retention is a big issue right now in the industry. The second is that the growth in productivity of the tier 3 student employed over time is triple as compared to the growth in productivity of a tier 1 guy. I'm not saying the productivity as such, but the growth in productivity over time is triple. So this calls for the industry to go to those schools where you do not go for placements. You cannot go there, you do not have access to placements there. You go there and you train those guys, you improve their skills to be employed, and that benefits you because it's improving your retention. And secondly, they have a high growth in productivity over time.
Yeah, thanks. I think the comment is well placed in terms of industry should interface with institutions more. I'm not taking tier 3, I'm saying tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 industry must interface. But I also sort of respect what Sandeep said. Whatever we do, we must set standards. I think he meant it for the skilling, but I think it holds true even for commerce sector. You need standards. I think that's a comment which I would make. And many of these institutions today are suffering because their focus has been more towards money in terms of without setting standards. I think as Sandeep highlighted, it's not bad to make money, but at the end of the day, but you must set standards. I think that's been the highlight which we started with Khadija and we ended with Sandeep. Any further questions? Maybe we can take last two questions. Yeah, one hand going up. Yeah.
I'm Shankar. I have a question about the access of education. I'm not talking about formal or informal, either way. The question is, when we have technology to reach every nook and corner of the world, like the mobile networks, then why cannot education reach the nook and corner of the world? I mean, it's basically the same technology that we use. For example, cloud computing. We can make it a generic education, reach all the people who need education from all the nook and corners of the world. Why is it not being sunk in?
Education reaches all corners of the world. If you want to address that, or you want to go? Okay.
Couple of lines on that. I'll give you an example. I don't have a very broad answer to this. We're looking at a company right now which provides anybody in the room the ability to become a teacher and anybody in the room to be a student of any subject. Right? That's democratization of education, massification of education, where you as a teacher can pay 10,000 rupees for an online platform, upload your courses, and teach anybody anything, anytime you want. Leveraging social learning, and I as a student can pay you 100 rupees for a course, 100 people can pay you 100 rupees, maybe 1,000 can pay you. Nobody has ever been able to disrupt education with the internet yet, but things like that are going to happen. You heard of massively online courses, MOOCs. Those things are great for a segment of the population which understands the concept of MOOC, but a segment that doesn't get it, online education, one laptop per child, other initiatives are taking education to the people in a massive way. It's beginning to occur.
A big comment from Sathish and Nilesh before we take the last question on that.
One thing I would like to say, if you are making money from anything in education, you are actually skilling, you are giving training, you are not educating. Think of the countries which actually have learned to create knowledge, or the frontiers of knowledge. Their education reached everyone well before the pieces of technology as such. In America, everyone had education before they got their cell phones, or any technology as such. So in Europe, so in any of the advanced middle coast countries. Point is to understand, what we are doing is, we are responsible in creating for-profit and non-profit institutions where they can earn to address an immediate problem, a spot problem, where you can make money around education. But that is that education is the basic question you ask. Education is what liberates, helps you become creative. But learning a skill is a very different story. So you have to distinguish between these two things. And one laptop per child was designed as a cell phone of education. Just like cell phone became viral, in 10 years it could cover the ground from 2% to 80-90%. OLPC can help the child learn two things. Number one, it becomes real education, where a child, even the underprivileged, learns as best as, say, Exeter or Andover or doesn't matter which school you're looking at, despite all the lack of infrastructure and privileges. So how do you do that? That's why it was created. But do we have the capacity to even understand what's been created? That's the major challenge that I'm facing. That India is not stopping to look at. What is the possibility to change what we haven't delivered in 65 years? Can we do that? We are looking at small spot challenges which will give us small advantages and profits. But government is not able to look at what is ahead, what we should do, what we are missing out on the table. I'm the same child who comes from a village where the per capita income is 10,000 rupees a year. And government gave me 5,640 rupees scholarship over a 11-year period and allowed me to pay back 10,000 times in taxes. If they did the same thing to every child, just imagine how big a country India will be.
I think what you asked for is very much in the offing. There are quite a few initiatives that are being worked on. Of course, the classical case study is the Grameen and British Council in Bangladesh, which achieved a lot for English literacy using the cell phone. There are a lot of initiatives that are rolling out in India, Malaysia, Thailand, using not only the mobile phone as an IVRS mode, but also using the DTH. So, maybe in a year or two, you'll see this model is emerging significantly.
Thanks, Nilesh. I think
Yeah, is this clear? Excuse me if I don't stand
that is the
up.
last question,
Yeah. Excuse me if I don't stand up. It's terribly cold and I'm hungry. But I want to know about the incorporation of innovation or skill set in our education systems currently. How sustainable is this, considering us creating jobs right now or up to this point? As stated, at this point we have great amount of unemployment. Will our future resources be able to accept this, innovation or incorporation? Do we have the resources to sustain such? And I'm asking the question to the panel as a whole, not to anyone individually. Yeah, that's perfect.
sorry, I didn't capture it. Yeah, innovation and education, I think that Aneja would like to last comment on that in terms of.
I can just give a general perspective. I can just give a general perspective, not specifically to India, of course, but I think it has to be sustainable in the long run. When you're talking about higher unemployment, I think this is very common in this part of the world. And if we want to cater to handle the unemployment issues, the higher education has to incorporate the skill. Skill development is not a separate subject. It can be incorporated as part of the curriculum. The teaching has to be in a way where skills are incorporated in an individual so that when he or she comes in the workforce, either they can find a job for themselves or they can create job, by being an entrepreneur, coming up with innovative ideas, using technology at their hands. So I think it is sustainable and it has to be sustainable for our economies to grow and prosper.
We are going live on Facebook and Twitter. There is a question on Facebook from Mr. Nabil, who is asking, will privatizing the education system solve some of the problems? This question came on Facebook as we are live on Facebook and Twitter. It's me here. So I'm just re-telecasting what was put across on Twitter and
Oh, so
Facebook.
you're on Facebook, okay. So, Shankar, would you like to sort of address this issue?
So, I think for sure, somebody's already given statistics on China and what private education has done, and we have enough statistics sitting in this state of Maharashtra, the state I come from in Tamil Nadu, what private education has value added, the system in terms of numbers, in terms of innovation and everything. One comment that I'll also finish by with 2-3 questions which came in earlier. I personally think, going back to the numbers in Asia, specifically in India, there's no way but innovation. There will be a push into government, into private education, into higher education from the young people to change. It will be smart for us to change before they demand it. It will be smart if we, in formal systems, whatever systems they might be, to understand what is there, and that's exactly what innovation is. And if it's going to be sustainable or not, for sure it's sustainable because this is related to humans, and for sure it will last as long as people want that change. And I personally think there's going to be a very exciting moment in the next 10 years. Use of technology already happening. Just yesterday, my nephew, when I was asking him how to use my Apple time machine, trying to read an instruction book, and he says, why would you do that? Go on YouTube, there's somebody who's given an answer, watch a 2-minute video, figure it out and do it. They're learning in very different ways. And I think all we have to do is understand it and incorporate it, and I'm sure it's going to happen. Thank you.
We had a very wide range of discussions, starting from Khadija, Shankar, Sahu, Sandeep, Sathish, and Nilesh. And I don't want to summarize this. One of my most brilliant professors once told me that if you've been attentive, you don't need a summary. If not, you certainly don't need a summary. So, with those comments, I'm going to sort of finish this panel. Thank you for being here.
To the panel, as a token of our appreciation, I would like to request the chairman of CAAYE Mumbai chapter to hand over a memento. This is a book on young Indians, The Change We Want to Be, released at our national summit a few years ago by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Thank you so much for being part of this extremely interesting session. Thank you. Thank you. We'll also be moving straight into our next panel. So those who would like to tea or coffee, please take your cups and come back onto your tables, please. Thank you.